Welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelvitz. Today we're talking about who's in charge. Let's take a look. Is your boss older or younger? Have you been in the workforce for a while and now you have a younger boss? Are you just starting out and your boss is older than you? Or it could even be younger than you? What we're going to talk about today is why it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether your boss is younger or older than you. We put a lot of emphasis on this and we put a lot of concern about it, but as we've talked about in previous shows, is building that communication piece so that older and younger and different experience level people have an opportunity to work seamlessly together. It's really becoming much more common for an older worker to have a boss that is younger. That's been happening. It's happened to me. I've had it many times where my boss was younger than me, especially as my career progressed. But it wasn't a problem because we found a way to communicate. So today we're going to really take a look at who's in charge. Is your boss older or younger? And how we can work with that, because it really doesn't matter. So let's take a look at what it's really about. It's not about age. It's about trust. Really, where does the authority come from? Does it come just because you're older? Does it come because you're sitting in that chair and you have a title? Where does it really come from? Authority really comes from clarity, competence, and respect, and not your birth year. Now, of course, we tend to have hierarchies in our companies and organizations, and a title does carry something with it, but that can only take you so far, because authority doesn't come from your title or your age. It really comes from that clarity, that competence, that respect, that mutual respect, that way of finding a way to work together. We shouldn't make assumptions that a younger boss is too green or an older teammate is past it. Really, both assumptions just cost you talent that you could be using in your organization. And as we've talked repeatedly in previous shows, intergenerational teams is the way to go. They're really the most productive and they're really the most innovative. So if your team can trade that age scorecard for a contribution scorecard, you're much better off. It's going to move much more smoothly. You know, I had a place where I was working where I sat down with my boss and we were talking, and he said, "You know, I got to be honest with you. You know, you're the age of my father," and I was uncomfortable with that originally. And I said, "Well, that's natural. We take a look at our experience and we look at those kind of things, but we have mutual respect. We had a good working relationship. We found a way to communicate on a regular basis. And it really became not about our age, but it became the trust and the confidence, the clarity that we had together, and the respect. So let's take a look at why mixed age teams win. As we've talked in previous shows, and we'll be talking, of course, in the future, we found a way to sharpen innovation because now we've melded those different experiences and we've taken a way to bring those together. We're mixing perspectives. It's lifting creativity. It's enhancing problem solving and really supercharging it. And if we can do that, we're going to make better decisions. Because that broader experience shrinks the team's blind spots. Because now we're looking at it from multiple perspectives, multiple experience levels, how people relate to the world outside of your company or organization. And that leads to higher engagement of your team members. And we work at and that value, that respect. And we find that the age doesn't matter. So your boss can be younger or older than you. And it's really the relationship that matters. And we create that two-way knowledge. I, as a person who is a bit older and has experience in certain ways, have seen things fail, have seen things work, have found the way to make that happen. But a junior partner brings a new perspective to look at it and also can help take a look at it, how it reflects in today's world. Because today's world works for both of us, no matter what age. So there's a group called WEGI who did a 6-year study. It was 8,800 employees across 745 teams. And they found that these mixed teams really are the ones that win. The mixed age. You know, we look at other kind of diversities, but often we don't look at the age of them. And if you look inside of some companies, they can be very monolithic like that. And I'm sure you've run into that. We have a tendency to push out our older workers. We have a tendency to not make space for our younger workers, rather than finding better ways to make that happen. So what if you're a younger boss and now you're leading someone older than you? So let's look at leading someone older than you and how we make that work. So as we already started to talk about, lead with respect, not rank. Make them a mentor, not a rival. And judge the work, not the age. So how does that play out? So if you're leading with respect, you're asking for input, which you should be doing with any of your team members anyhow, but you actually have to use it. Now, not every idea that your team members come up with can be used, but if they see that you are utilizing their ideas and giving them credit for it with the rest of the team and the people who you report to, that creates a lot of respect. That creates a synergy for you to be able to work together. If you have an older worker, they've had a lot of experience. We all know you can't substitute for experience. If you think about something that you do today, think about what it looked like the first time you did it. It was very different than having experience within it. So make them a mentor in certain situations. Now, as we've talked about in the reverse mentoring, you can be a mentor to them. But use it. Use the experience to your advantage. But be open to it and let them know that you are open to it. And like we should be doing anyhow in the workplace is Let's judge the work that people do, not the age. I've gotten incredible work out of younger workers and out of older workers and everything in between. And I've had younger and older ones not do it. And they necessarily can't stay with your team. So if you're really coaching on those outcomes and you hold everybody to the same level, the same bar, it all evens out. They will bring more to your team. And that's why I talk so much about intergenerational teams. They're incredibly powerful. Now let's look at the opposite. When you're the employee, when your boss is younger than you. So what does a younger leader bring to the equations? They've got fresh tools. They know about some of the newer digital tools to use. They have some newer networks, newer ideas, energy to challenge old habits, because we can all get stuck in the same way we're doing things. The worst thing that I used to hear when I would come into, especially when I was consulting and coming into a company, is, well, we always did it that way. Well, if it was working, they wouldn't have needed me. And often I was brought in to help turn around something that wasn't working. So we would look at what worked and then build on that rather than just throwing everything out. But a new leader can bring that. So what does the experienced person bring, that experienced hand? They have hard-won judgments because they have experience. They've gone through those things before. They have institutional memory, which is very important to a company. You want to have that brain trust. They've seen a lot, so they tend to be calmer under pressure. And since they've been in the business for a while, they really have those deep client relationships and colleague relationships that you can tap that will help your team excel and succeed. So look at it from both sides. You want to know what the younger leader is bringing, and that's important, and what the experienced person is bringing. So it's not about age, it's about experience, it's about enhancement, it's about communications. So what is the advantage of that? Let's look at what makes the age gap an advantage. So let's tie these things together here. If we look at it and look at neither side outranks the other. Think about the two of you working together. It's really going to, the sum is going to be greater than the whole, than the separate parts. Tenure is important, but expectations on contribution are even more important. And like I said early on, it goes back to that mentoring. You can pair people within your team, a more experienced older person and a younger, newer person, but it has to be two-way. It only works if it's a two-way mentoring. I don't know about you, but every mentoring situation I've ever been in has always been successful when we both were learning, whether I was the mentor or the mentee. As we talked about in earlier shows, that communication piece is really important. We all have different styles of communicating. We even have different tools of communicating. But your team has to have one central place to talk to each other, whether that's a Slack channel or some kind of text or email or conversations or starting off the day for 10 minutes all talking to each other, whatever's working. You have to have that central place where you are communicating. And if you're finding that the styles are diverging, it's up to you as the leader to help those converge. But these biases only happen if we allow them to, because a lot of times it's unconscious. We don't even realize we're doing it. So name it and say, all right, we're initially uncomfortable because I'm much younger than you and I'm your boss. Or I think I know how to do this and you're just starting out. But name it, and then you can shut it down in both directions. Because all it does is give your team less time to actually work on things. And then celebrate your successes. You know, we all tend to hear when we've done something wrong. And in some organizations and companies, you are punished for getting things wrong. But we always learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. But we need to celebrate. You know, I've been in situations where I had a boss who liked to take credit for everything that we did. And guess what? The team was jagged. It didn't meld. It didn't work well together. I know whenever I've had a team, the people above me always heard how well my people were doing. I gave the credit to those folks. You know, it's about leadership. I'm a big believer that one of the big parts of leadership that gets lost is my job is to replace myself. Because if I've brought people up, I can move to the next level or on to something else that I want to be doing, only if I can replace myself with somebody who can do the job. And if your organization is doing that, or your company, that can help it grow and fire it up. And you can develop your younger managers. Because I will tell you from my own experience that once you get into this a little longer, those positions are less important. I always enjoyed getting good, interesting projects done, and less important with the title, which enabled me to work well very frequently with bosses that were younger than me. And when they were open to learn from my experience and I was open to learn from theirs, it became very powerful. So we make the age gap an advantage. After a word from our sponsor, we'll come back and talk about some action items that you can do in order to talk about who is in charge. Hello, welcome back to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelvitz. Today's episode, we're talking about who's in charge. And we've had an opportunity to talk about when your boss is younger than you, when you're the person coming in as the older person and working with somebody younger than you, and vice versa. So let's look at some action items that you can work on so that you can better understand who's in charge. Action item 1. Set expectations on contribution, not tenure. So as we talked about, you need to actually develop your system and your reward system to enhance the contributions, not the age. We're not our age. We're our contributions. We're our experience. We're able to make those things happen. So if you're able to set up the expectations initially in your team and say, what I want is your contribution. What I want is you to enhance the team. What I want is you to bring to the table what you've done before and what you're going to be doing in the future, and be able to meld that with what the other people are doing. It's not just about the tenure or the age. Action item 2. Shut down age bias in both directions. Now, as we talked about, a lot of times age bias is unconscious. We don't even realize we're doing it. It's built in. It's the language that we use every day, how we talk about age, how we talk about people who are much older or younger. And as I talked about before, I came into a situation where after we've been working for a little while, my boss said, hey, you're the age of my father, and I thought this wasn't going to work. And he was initially uncomfortable with the fact that I reminded him of his father. But I wasn't his father. I was his teammate. I worked on his team. I was his employee. It wasn't that kind of relationship. And once we worked that out and built the communications, our different levels of experience and our age, the age no longer mattered. It was what we got done together. It's how we both contributed. It's how I contributed to his team to help it succeed, because we had that intergenerational dialogue. But in order to shut it down, sometimes you just have to name it. You may have to come to your team and go, we got a problem. We're at cross purposes here because we're letting age interfere, or tenure. We're saying things subconsciously like, oh, he's too old, he doesn't know what he's talking about. They're too young, they have no experience. That's nonsense. We all have something to offer. So if we shut it down early by naming it and working to get rid of it, we can shut down that age bias in both directions. Action item 3. Celebrate intergenerational wins out loud. So this goes with action items 1 and 2. This grows out of that. We are celebrating when those intergenerational interactions create real wins for the team. Like I said before, and I've been in these situations where people tend to get negative. They just talk about what's not working and don't talk about what is working. A little bit of praise goes a long way. And I think sometimes when we're working so quickly and with the pace of business nowadays, we forget about that. We just look at what isn't working. We really have to celebrate our intergenerational wins out loud. Now, we want to celebrate all the team's wins, but remember, we're trying to break down those barriers where you may have a younger boss with older team members, and you have team members who are all different ages and different experience levels. And some of those unconscious biases, or even conscious biases, are starting to interfere. And when we celebrate it as an intergenerational win, we break down those barriers. So looking again at our action items, action item 1, set expectations on contributions, not tenure. And as we talked about, the contribution is what's important. It's what everybody brings to the team, not what age they are, because we're not our age. And if you've seen the other shows that come before this, we talk about this all the time. We set up these artificial barriers, and that keeps us from working well together. Action item 2. Shut down age bias in both directions. We got to get rid of this nonsense where we talk about people about their age and what that means. It's about competence. It's not about age. You can be great in your 80s. You can be great in your 20s. And you can be great in your 40s. You can also not be great in any of those. And that happens. But just because somebody's older doesn't mean they can't do it anymore. They just do it differently than you do. And every generation for the entire history of people, they've always complained about the next generation coming after them, and that generation always complains about the one that comes before them. But we have a tendency to set up these artificial barriers. So if we name it and shut down the age bias in both directions, that can be incredibly powerful. Action item 3. Celebrate intergenerational wins out loud. When you talk about the wins that your team is having, remember to point out when it's an intergenerational win, even more so than when it isn't. Why? Because you're building an intergenerational team. Because we all know that that is more powerful, more productive, and more innovative, and that's what we should be looking for. But when we celebrate that an older and a younger team member, or you as the boss or leader of that team, also having that interaction, let's celebrate it. Let's talk about how, because we had views from different age levels and experience levels, that we came out with something more powerful. So now for our tip of the day. Who's in charge? Whoever earns the team's trust. Remember, we're building trust here. So we got to get rid of all the clutter and nonsense that's in our head about generations and about our assumptions, and understand whoever's in charge, that age doesn't matter. And in a world where it's becoming more common for an older worker to have a younger boss, as well as it's been for a long time where an older boss has younger team members, how do we do that interaction? How do we smooth it out? The action items talk about that. But what comes out of this tip about who is in charge is whoever earns the team's trust. Is you've built that trust. You've built it on both sides. Now you're really powerful. Extremely powerful. So this has been another episode of Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelvitz. I'd like you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We've got a QR code here for you. Make it easy. Come, take a look, comment, see some of our previous episodes. We'd love to have you as part of our community. So remember, Bridging of Ages. I'm Dan Mendelvitz. Invest in brain power, fuel brilliance.